Like the one part is the beginning, and then the one on the bottom is the one she made up with like the eagles. So just for the
I think we left off with Theodora and attendance. Is that correct? No, we looked at Saint Apollinaire. Did we? All right. We did the icons.
Is there a video for yesterday?
Yes. Yeah. Okay, we've got the Theotokos and a child between Saints Theodore and George. The word Theotokos means one who gives birth to Christ. And that would be the Virgin Mary. So Theotokos and Virgin Mary are the same thing. And the Virgin Theotokos is a popular type of icon. The Theotokos Virgin is in hundreds and hundreds of icons. Notice the angels behind her. They are looking up. And notice the hand of God coming down from the top. So one of the reasons why the Virgin is so important to those of the Byzantine era is that she is seen as the interceptor of God. She is like middle management of God, that you can, it's easier to talk to mom than it is to talk to dad. Dad's kind of harsh, all right, where mom is a little bit more empathetic. And that is the role of the Virgin. So people would pray to her. She was a popular person to pray to because of this image of her as being seen as a motherly person, somebody that's, like I said, easier to talk to. And we can pray to her and she will intervene for us. So we can ask her for favors and then she will ask God or Christ for favors on our behalf. So she gave birth to Christ and thus can intercede for us because she is a mother. Like I said, she's more empathetic. And being a mother, she would be more understanding of our shortcomings. And once again, we have all these frontal facing figures.
Is she sitting or does she not have feet?
She does have feet and she is sitting. So this, come on, stupid. I've got to buy a new laser pointer. I just put in a new battery and there we go. All right, she is wearing blue. Blue is her color. She is sitting on a gold throne. So this down here is not her dress, but the gold throne that she is sitting on. Her feet are there and there. And if we look closer, truly divine figures look off to the sides. So the Virgin Mary and the baby Christ are looking towards the sides, and the angels are looking up towards heaven. The angels are reminding us of the rewards of heaven. So people that were human like us look out at us. Those are the two figures on the side. And the saints are conduits excuse me, the saints are conduits to approach the divine and enter into heaven. So they're kind of like, again, a buffer zone between the immortal people and us. And the virgin looks sorrowful, probably because she understands the future of her son. She often looks melancholic. All right. We were one slide away from finishing part one, so we're going to jump into part two. Okay, so much art history, never enough time to cover it all, so let's go run through the Renaissance or through the museum. All right, we're going to go into what we looked at before. That was early Byzantine, and I still haven't corrected the dates. We're getting into High Byzantine right now. So we're going to go back to the Hagia Sophia, and we're going to look at a mosaic that is in the Hagia Sophia. I need to, let's see. We need to do this. We need to do this. And Chopper's interview. So we're going to look at the tympanum, this apse that is off to the side. And there is another Theotokos. So virgin and child enthroned. Again, she is sitting with the child on her lap. She is sitting on the throne. There's pillows that she is sitting on. And it is up in this area right here of the Hagia Sophia. So if we get in close, this is what we are looking at. At this time, icons are becoming increasingly popular. Iconoclasm is over. By the way, anybody that likes art, raise your hand if you like art. All right. You're all sinners, according to the iconoclasts. Okay. Yeah, that's not the worst thing I've been called. All right. This is the emperor and the matriarch saying, "No more iconoclasm." So the artwork comes back with a vengeance. There's a resurgence of patronage of art during this period. Do you guys understand what patronage is? A patron. So a patron is somebody that hires an artist to make stuff. And so patronage is the system of people hiring artists to make stuff. And this painting or this mosaic right here looks a lot like an icon. And the vast majority of icons were destroyed during the iconoclasm period of the Byzantine era. And then one thing that is interesting here is I've been showing you the early Byzantine, everything looks really flat. But here we have a bench that is somewhat showing some space. There's a little bit of linear perspective. It's beginning to show some depth here. And she's seated on a bench with two cushions. And I want to talk about the gold in the background. I told you guys that the gold is a very obvious sign that you're looking at a Byzantine artwork. What the gold represents is the divine light of heaven. That is what the gold represents. And I think that's one of the questions on the test. All right, so be sure to know that. And we have this big gold field behind her. And I don't know if you noticed, she was just above a bunch of windows. Whoops. And those windows are really filling in the light and like making that gold glow. And it's meant to move you emotionally and spiritually and to inspire you to preach and teach the message. So here we have the two different Theotokos that we just looked at. The one on the right is an icon. It's painted on a piece of wood, whereas the one on the left is a mosaic. All right, we're going to move to, I believe it's Daphne that we're going to look at. So there's a church of the Dormition in Daphne. Dormition means death. It refers to the death and the ascension of Mary. And this is the most famous Middle Byzantine church because of the surviving mosaics that are inside. It's a very small church. And if you look at the top of it, I'm going to ask you, do you think that is a squinch system or a pendentive system holding up the dome?
Hard to tell from the top.
Yeah, it is difficult to tell. All right, so in these churches, the dome is seen as heaven, and the lower part, this square shape that is underneath, is personified as the earth. And the squinches or pendentives is the transition between heaven and earth.
What era did you say this was?
This is the Middle Byzantine, or is it the High Byzantine? High Byzantine. Yeah, and I have down there it says middle, and it should. I need to fix all of that. All right. So if we go inside and look up, we can see, are these squinches or are they pendentives? They are squinches. All right. So we have a octagonal support under the dome, and then the squinches are in the corners. And these squinches also have mosaics in them. So this is the Annunciation. This is the story where the angel comes down to tell Mary that she's gonna have a baby, which is shocking because she's not planning to have a baby. And in the Renaissance, we'll see that it has like that. It's a very popular story in the Renaissance. Also, if we compare these two, the one on the left, there's no background. It's just gold. And that again is to show the heavenly space or the light of God or the light of heaven. In the Renaissance, they go over the top with the details of the background, especially in the Northern Renaissance, like what that one is. I told you guys the story of the Transfiguration, so that is in another one of these squinches. But and then also I want to point out that the squinches are curved. They're not two-dimensional. They wrap around. And so the figures on these sides are actually facing each other. All right. It is really time for a new. Yep. But I need it before then. I'm just going to have to break down and just buy it. All right. But this is the one that we're looking for. We're looking for the figure in the center. Over here, this is the Annunciation that I just showed you. This is the Transfiguration that I just showed you. There's a couple other stories that we're going to skip over. It's the centerpiece that we really want to look at. And this is Christ as Pantocrator. The word Pantocrator means the last judge, the ruler of all. Now, look at the moods of these two and this guy right here. Which one's in a bad mood? Yeah, he is Mr. Frowny Face. All right, the deep facial lines. Also, he looks to his left. He has a suspicious look on his face. And does anybody know why he's looking to his left? So, in Christian philosophy, everything on the right is good, everything on the left is bad. So, he's looking to his left. He's looking at the souls of the damned. These are souls not going to heaven. He's judging them. Also, notice that his fingers are pointing down. To his right would be the souls going to heaven. So this focuses on his rage, looking at these souls on the left. Also, this is a time when Islam is encroaching on the Christian territories. And so we need to have a Christ that is a little bit more menacing, a little bit more intimidating to the enemies of Christianity. He holds a bejeweled Bible that would have been held by the priest below. And like I said, he no longer holds, or he no longer raises the two fingers. And then the halo that's behind him, that's called a cruciform halo. If you compare the two halos right here, the one on the right, you can just barely make out the cruciform. But the cruciform halo is that of Christ. If you see a halo on other figures, they usually don't have a cruciform. All right, now we're going to look at this mosaic over here on the left. And it is the crucifixion. Once again, we have a simple gold background. And we have some imagery of the crucifixion now creeping in. The body of Jesus looks more and more muscular because the Byzantines were influenced by Greek sculptures that were around them. Remember that the Byzantine is Greek based, and the Western Roman Empire is based in Italy. Yes, it is idealizing Jesus to some extent, but it does show the proportions. There's a little bit of contrapposto here. And he's thin because Jesus led a modest life. That means no gluttony. And if you notice the six pack on Jesus, that is influenced by Greece, or the influence of Greece. We have a mixture of classical organic structure and a Byzantine linearity or flatness. So, like, what I mean by that is that there's some Greek elements in here to make it look realistic, but also we have the flatness of the Byzantine era. If you look at Mary on the left, the fabric forms around her body, much like in the Greek sculptures. It's much more realistic. Again, the influence from the Greeks. And St. John the Evangelist is on the right. Down below, we have a skull, and that's a reference to Golgotha. Golgotha is the place where Jesus was crucified, and Golgotha is also the place where Adam was buried. Notice the three pegs. They held the cross in place to keep it from falling over. So over in Golgotha is right next to Jerusalem. And in Golgotha, there is a skull shape inside of a rock. And so they think that that is where Adam was buried and Jesus was crucified. All right, so Jesus was crucified. The Romans thought he was dead, so they speared him in the side, and blood and water that spilled out of him was white and red line coming out of Christ. And then if we compare him to a work of art that we just barely looked at in the late antiquity, notice how chunky the late antiquity image is on the right, and then how lean the Byzantine image is on the left. So the mosaic is much more realistic, and the proportions are not as clumsy. All right, so we're going to move then to Moscow, and inside Moscow there is an icon called the Vladimir Virgin. So we're going to take a closer look at her. This is the most famous icon in Russia. Notice the slightly green skin. I pointed out yesterday that when we were looking at how they made the icons, they painted the skin green first. And a lot of these icons will have this greenish kind of tint to their skin tone because the upper layers, the layers of skin tone have faded away. We're seeing the lower layers. All right, so this icon is believed to have saved all of Russia from the Tatar invasion and Poles of the 17th century. Notice the long straight nose, that is a Byzantine look to it. And she's a flat silhouette against the gold background. She is the Virgin of Compassion. Notice how she holds the baby, that weird looking baby. And she's showing tenderness. She's pressing her cheek to her son and shows you how you should feel. It's a very maternal pose. And she is protecting him and coddling him. And they're looking directly at us to make themselves more accessible. So we have a direct engagement with the divine. And I believe this painting survived a fire. I don't know why I don't have it in my notes. But we can compare it to the other icon that we looked at and notice that we now have this empty background and that the Virgin is looking out at us instead of away from us. All right, and then let's go into the late Byzantine art. Yeah. All right, so we're going to go to this church and we're going to look at the Pantocrator. I've also heard it pronounced Pantocrator. And again, we have the same kind of pose. We have the cruciform halo behind him. We have a blessing gesture. He's holding the book. All right, I've already talked to you guys about tesserae or tesserae. And again, that long nose is typical of the late Byzantine. And he looks at us with those judging eyes. Also in this church is a Theotokos across from the Pantocrator or Pantocrator. And then we have another donor portrait. I talked to you guys about donor portraits before. So here we have this character with a tiny little building right here. This is it's a model of the building that you are standing in, and he is offering it to Jesus. So he built this for Jesus, And then again, notice the pattern that is in his robes. That's a lot of detail for a mosaic. And then we have another pentameter, yeah, in the top of the dome. And if we're going to go down here, down to the end, where that apse is on the upper right, there is this piece right here. And this is the anastasis. All right, the term anastasis is the harrowing of hell. So when Jesus died on the cross and he was buried in the tomb, his soul went to hell. So when he says on the cross, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" He has been damned to hell. So he goes down to hell, and then he frees all of the people that lived before him. In the Old Testament, there was a so the way you get into heaven is by believing that Christ is the Savior. So what about all the good people that were alive before Christ was alive? They didn't know that Christ was the Savior, even though they were good people. So they're all down in hell in an area called limbo, right? So they're not being tortured, but they're not in heaven. They're not receiving the ecstasy of all the knowledge and being in heaven. So he goes down there and he frees them from hell and takes them up to heaven. So he kicks down the doors of Hades. This is what's happening. You have wood down below, and that is the doors that he has just kicked open. And you have all kinds of like clutter down here from the damage that he did of kicking down the doors. And so the two central people are Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were in hell because they didn't know Christ. And he grabs them by the wrist. He's being very forceful. And they cannot do it on their own. They can't get up to heaven on their own. They have to go through Jesus. Also is St. John the Baptist and the kings and the martyrs. And these figures are being shown from different angles and perspectives. Remember, at the very beginning of the Byzantine era, we have everybody is in frontal view uh, in the mosaics. Well, now we have people in different poses, and they're not all frontal view. We see them at a 3/4 view of all of these figures on the left and the right. So that is a huge difference between the late Byzantine and the early Byzantine. Also, if you look at the background, there's no longer a field of gold. And then, yeah, down at the bottom, I think, is the devil has been tied up. But this is a scene of high emotion. Also, behind Christ is a mandorla. This is an extra halo that goes around his body, not just his head. This is a very dynamic image, very different for Byzantine. Down here we have broken locks of the door that he just busted open, and then we see the devil being bound up. All right, and that will finish us for Byzantine art. We finished part 2 of 2, and we have some minutes left, so let's go to the next chat. We are going to skip chapter 2 or 10. We're going to go right into chapter 11. so we're gonna skip through we're gonna run through the art museum. We're in chapter 11 now. So write the header at the top of every page for your notes for chapter 11. You're gonna write chapter 11 at the top, and also go to the table of contents. Write the page that you start chapter 11 on next to chapter 11. And this is a reminder to do 5 hand-drawn sketches per chapter. Okay, so we are going to move away from Constantinople and go back over into Europe. And this slide here just shows you how fluid the migration patterns are in Europe. That barbarians are just moving around to different places. And after the fall of Rome, or the quote unquote fall of Rome in 410, barbarians are pretty much wandering all over Europe. And there's all different kinds of different sects, that's SECTS, of barbarians, the Visigoths and Goths, and there's different tribes that are all moving around. The word barbarian comes from a Greek word which means, the way that the Greeks heard the barbarians speak, they said they barbled their language, or that when they spoke, they had a lot of barble type sounds, so they called them barbarians. And do you guys remember this guy right here? He was wearing the torque, and so most of the art of these barbarians, because they're moving around, most of the artwork is going to be like jewelry making in nature. There's not much large monumental sculptures. That we're not going to be looking at monumental pieces of architecture. So the artwork that we're going to look at is going to be mostly small in nature, because they have to move around. They're not staying in one place. They're moving around, and so they can carry jewelry with them, but they cannot carry large marble sculptures with them. So we're going to go to England, and we're going to look at a place called Sutton Hoo. So in this field next to a river, they found all of these big land pimples, these big unusual hills. And they started excavating these hills, and in one of these hills, they found a ship, a boat. And there's a movie on Netflix called The Dig that is about the excavation of Sutton Hoo. And anyways, the Anglo-Saxons would have made boats that are similar to this to house the dead. Right, it's like a tomb for the dead. Instead of making a monumental piece of architecture, they put them on a boat and sailed them off, and then the boat would eventually sink or fall apart. And in this, they would have brought the boat into this field and buried the boat. And inside the boat would be the person that is buried and all of their stuff. So when they excavated, they found a bunch of stuff, and it is all on display. But we're going to take a look at this right here, this Anglo-Saxon shoulder clasp. and it is made of this this style of artwork is millefiori. Literally translates as 1,000 flowers. It's thin pieces of glass cut into precise shapes and geometric shapes with stylized animal forms. Do you see the animals in this piece of jewelry?
Is it the weird curvy things?
Yeah, the weird curvy things, yes. But the whole thing is weird curvy things.
Well, on the image of one.
Yeah, so along here, we have a snake biting itself, like two snakes biting themselves. And then up here, we have, if you follow this curve around this way, this is the head with horns. It's a bull or a boar. And then we have a smaller one here. There we go. We can see it a little bit better. What is amazing here is the skill and craftsmanship of this. These are pieces of glass and gems and gold that are shaped precisely and fit together. The checkerboard, these are different shapes that are carved and then fit together so precisely that there's no gap between them. It is amazing craftsmanship. This is not just painted on. In fact, let's go ahead and
恰斯法文化是一个非物质文化遗产，但为什么我们就是做了很多现代化的东西，就是希望更多人了解。最难的一点就是它的每个步骤都是需要环环相扣的。如果你掐丝过程当中，你的丝线没有掐的完全粘合于底板，或者是你的接口地方没有闭合的话，那后面上颜色一定会受到影响。基本上说是有2/3的时间都在掐丝。小的挂件的话是5cm，直径大小需要3个小时。深入学下去的话，那平时需要就是有一点绘画技巧，然后平时要稍微练习一下。
we have a purse cover. With amazingly intricate design. In the lower left, we have a man between two beasts, and we have eagles attacking ducks. And then on the right, we have a man between two beasts. And these have a dense, abstract, and animal geometric designs. It's called an animal interlace design. But and then also we can talk about like the symmetrical quality. If you divide that man down the center, it's the same on both sides. And then the eagles attacking the ducks are a mirror image of each other. So there's a lot of symmetry and uh, 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 symmetrical design going on in these Anglo-Saxon jewels. This we have a belt cover, and then they found these parts of a helmet, and then these are the parts of a helmet, and they designed like in the 1940s. They thought the helmet would have looked like this, but then they redesigned it in the 1971. So here is the helmet that they have found. So most of this is reconstructed. You can see that the little parts of the helmet that are original. And then on the cover, we have a rider running over the enemy. So you can see the horse, and then the man on top of the horse with the spear, and then the enemy underneath the horse. And again, the symmetrical design uh, on the figure. All right, so we're going to move on into Viking art. Vikings are mostly from Denmark and Norway and Sweden. And you've probably heard that the Vikings are the first, or were the first to reach North America in the year 1000. Is they long before Christopher Columbus or the other explorers had reached America. So they had crossed across the Norwegian Sea to Iceland, and from there to Greenland, and from there to Newfoundland. And so they had explored the upper areas of Canada. Anyways, their ships would have looked like this, and some of their ships are on display, or replicas of their ships are on display. But we're going to move past this, and we can see some of their artwork. This design, this pattern that they have seems to be consistent with different groups in the northern parts of uh, Europe. This almost like lacy animal pattern that you can see in the figures. You can see the comparison, the similarities between the patterns that we have up here and the patterns that we have in the ship and in the faces. I think these things are cool. They're royal rune stones. And if we get close, we can look at the low relief sculpture that we have on top of them. These would have been a family burial mound, and they have inscriptions on them in runic. But reason I like these, it's the only polychrome that I really like. I think it looks really good in polychrome. All right, and that's why I'm showing them to you. So, all right, moving on to the Stave Church. Now, look at how steep the building is. Why do you think it is so steep? So we have churches in the Eastern Empire that have a slant on the roof, but a mosque, look at how flat the roof is on the mosque. So, and it says up here the roof reflects the climate. Is there a lot of rain where they have mosques? Is in dry desert areas, right? So there's not much rain. And here, this is there would have been a little bit of rain, but in Norway and Sweden, there's a lot of rain, there's a lot of snow. So they have these steep hills to push the snow off of the roof so it doesn't cave it in. All right, so the main thing about a stave church is that it has four huge timbers to support that central roof. Right, you can see those large timbers to the left and to the right. And they have these creatures on here, these dragon heads, to protect from trolls and demons. All right, so we're going to go to a stave church that is in Ørns, Norway, and we're going to look at the side of it, and we're going to look at a carved portal and wall reliefs on the side. And if we get close to it, there we go. Carved portal and wall reliefs. And it shows the image of this dog with this curved pattern around it. And this is the same dog. It's an Irish wolfhound, one of the largest breeds. Sorry, it's a dragon resembling a deerhound. That's right. Being bitten by snakes and forming that curving pattern. And we're going to stop here for today. Are there any questions about anything? Yes.